to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. How do we learn to truly thrive together? How do we stay connected to our authentic selves, each other, and our purpose as a team, especially when challenged? How do we unlock the deeper levels of group intelligence? Enjoy this episode of the Connected Teamwork podcast and learn practical tools to evolve the connectedness of your team to its next level.
Welcome to the episode number 9 of the Connected Teamwork podcast. And I'm here with Hilke Faber and Carson Heddy. And today's episode is dedicated to one of the team defining moments. And the one that we're going to be focusing today on is team reflections and or team reflection. And before we do that, we'll do a little bit of connecting by checking in and answering how you're feeling and what's your intention. I'll start. I feel great because I had an opportunity, a rare opportunity to spend time with a friend from Ukraine who also happens to live in the US right now in Chicago. And we spent 2 wonderful days exploring Seattle area. And she is one of the people I worked with many years ago. And I'm still connected to most of that team till today. And that's a very nice feeling. We actually met another person who worked with us here in Seattle from a different country and three of us spent time together and reflected upon the value of kind of staying connected through the years and seeing what's happening with the lives of each other. So it was very, very nice. And my intention for today is to explore together with Hilke and Carson, why do we need to do a group reflection? What's the value of that? And what role it plays in a bigger process in the team development, team growth, and team performance. With that, I'm in. Over to you, Hilke.
Welcome, Elena, and welcome everyone who's listening. I am feeling present, also a little playful. I had a weekend where there was both kids and older generation, and there was a lot of play and reflection happening at the same time. My intention for this conversation about group reflection is to enjoy it and to help share in the power, really redemptive power of reflection. What happens when we allow ourselves a moment to, as you're listening to this podcast, a moment to just reflect and take a look with very kind eyes and see what that helps in terms of transformation and togetherness. And with that, I'm in, and over to you, Carson.
Thank you, Hilke. Elena, always good to see you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm feeling fulfilled and I'm feeling blessed. And I love doing these on Mondays because you get what my wife terms the best version of me. You get Monday Carson, where my energy is at an all-time high. I had my team meeting earlier today, and just so energized by that group and the opportunity to work with them and learn from them. And it's, my intention for today, perfect segue into that, is really just to spend time, as I was preparing for this episode, just thinking about some of the teams that I've been fortunate to be a part of over the years and how we've benefited from reflection and celebrating successes, but also, looking at failure and, being able to sit in that together and learn from it. So really excited about sharing some of those learnings and lessons today with both of you. So with that, I am in, and I'll turn it back to Elena.
Welcome, Carson. Welcome, Hilke. And you sort of started already, Carson, talking about why, right? Why we could benefit from team reflection, like looking at our successes and also looking at our failures and learning from it, right? So let's maybe explore this a little further. Why it's important to reflect as a team, and maybe in what circumstances or in what situations that's something that's really critical to do. Do you want to, Helga, would you want to start?
I'm happy. This is one of my favorite topics. So when and why? No, let me start with when. And to me, the when is always. The when is being on the balcony of ourselves and each other and keeping some detachment and detached awareness can be helpful always. I'm reminded of the conversation with Michael Jordan, who was asked so many times, like, how did you do it? How did you become so good? And one of the things he said is, while I was playing, I was at the same time already also being a spectator from the side, because I could see where the ball was going a few passes ahead of me. And that is part of the power of reflection, that we can keep a bird's eye view that's bigger than our immediate concerns, what's on the agenda. We keep the whole perspective, we stay connected to the whole perspective. So to me, that's a reflexive muscle that we can develop for always without getting completely lost in the clouds. We also are in this conversation, just like I'm in this conversation with you right now. So why? So as Michael Jordan said, it helps you to step ahead. For me, it's also, it gives perspective, so you get to see as a team and as an individual person what's really going on, what's true. Like when I'm in this meeting with somebody and it's not going well, I could be overwhelmed by my fear, by my anxiety, or whatever it is. And when I take a step back, I see, oh, there's another person in the room. Maybe they go through something as well. What if I touch base with them as well? And suddenly we have connection going again. So to me, one of the values of group reflection is that it provides a bigger perspective. And then the second thing is, to me, it drops the shoulders. Like I was in a meeting on Saturday evening. It was just impromptu meeting. It was organized by somebody who had watched another podcast called Rooted and Wavering. And she was so happy about it that she wanted to get a group of people to talk about it together, about the topic there. And one of the people there started to share about how she had been very judgmental to her children and how she had learned later on in life how that gotten in the way of her being the parent that she aspired to be. And it was interesting to watch what happened in the room, because it was almost like everybody was breathing a sigh of relief, like, oh, I don't have to be perfect. It's okay. that there's stuff here. I got stuff going on. And when I share my stuff, you also feel freer for you to share your stuff. And when you share your stuff, the stuff has less of a grip on us. It creates a space for us to actually be much more effective and in flow together. So that's a bit about why I'm an advocate of group reflection always. What about you, Carson?
Yeah, phenomenal question, because, when you think about connected teamwork, there's so much to reflect upon. And where I have seen, many, many leaders over my time, I think sometimes there is this predisposition that, oh no, I don't want to take my team out of doing their day to day. I don't want to schedule a meeting, when they need to be in front of our customers or they need to be focused on their projects. But the reality is, we need to do those because those are an investment in connected teamwork. Having these reflective conversations, addressing things head on, getting that elephant in the room out there immediately. I talked about a couple of the reasons that, reflection is important, talking about successes. We've talked in prior episodes about recognition, and that recognition is free. These are things that we can do on a daily basis. If we're having daily stand-ups and huddles with our team, even if it's 5-10 minutes as a touch point, reflecting on the day prior, what did you learn? These things are important. I was inspired by a post from this weekend on LinkedIn, where someone in my feed shared a segment that they do with their team called "What Are You Learning?" And I instituted it on my team meeting today. What are you learning? What are some of these podcasts and books and materials that you're digesting outside of our organization that are inspiring you? Because these things can benefit us all. How can we celebrate that? When you have a project that goes awry, or maybe a deal that is lost, we need to have that post-mortem, and we need to sit in it and understand the lessons and the learnings from these things, so that, to your point, Hilke, we can see around corners better going forward as a result of these learnings. And the last thing I would say is big challenges and changes. We live in a world where things are constantly changing. And I have found that, especially from a leadership vantage point, I have a lot of admiration for the leaders that do this. And I always try to be the leader that does this as well. When there are massive changes happening in your organization, and a lot of the people who you get paid to support, serve, and protect have these issues that are top of mind for them, we've got to sit in that with them. And I'm a big believer in calling meetings specifically to sit and listen, understand what's top of mind for our teams, and making sure we're reflecting on what's happening, how we can meet these things with a growth mindset, but do it together. Because frankly, connecting, truly learning, and changing as a team requires continuous improvement and growth mindset. And we're only going to get there by sitting in it all together and reflecting on how we can broach these topics best as a team. What about you, Elena?
Yeah, totally resonate with me what both of you said. What I would add, that in terms of when, I guess at the end of any important project, that's critical to set time aside and do that, intentionally, for the debriefing as a group on what worked well, what might have worked better, and also to celebrate that piece that worked well, and also in the middle of longer term projects or longer term tasks, particularly when things are not as perfect as we wish them to be. That's something where we also need to kind of go to that balcony and take a bigger view and have a honest conversation. So those would be the critical elements. Also, any success or failure is a moment to have a reflective session with a group. What helped us be so successful this time, because usually when we reach success, we just kind of, oh yeah, great, let's have a party and move on to the next task. When it's failure, we often upset, demotivated, or looking for people to be blamed for that failure, right? Finding that one team, one department that caused it all, and it's obviously some other team or some other department, right? So just being honest in that conversation, and also sitting in with success and with failure, and dedicating time to both. And in my experience, often it's not happening not because there is no understanding of the importance of this, of the reflection, but no time is set aside for this. We're just too busy with the new task, new challenge, new problem that becomes too critical, has to be addressed right now. So of course, 5 people have a meeting, 2 don't show up because they have other important things, and so on. So reflection never happens. So that has to be intentional. And also in terms of why, the big benefit, in my experience, is we're so different. People just bring in such a different perspective, skills, experience, expertise, emotions, and so on, and just grow as a team. You could have amazing insights on your own from this project failure or something, right? But it doesn't get captured by the team going forward, because it's not a team insight, it's just your own insight. So I guess I want to maybe explore with you, if you don't mind, the topic of how to make these insights really the team insights, rather than something that you're so convinced that has to change and no one else is really seeing that. And also, how do you create an environment in which these, let's say, I don't know, best of insights truly surface, truly come to the forefront, and we really act upon them after that reflection? So who wants to go first?
I'll jump right in. I love this question. So when we think about how to do reflection, it's, to me, helpful to realize how to not do it. and how to not do it is about being in judgment of each other or of ourselves. That's a sure way to stifle the conversation so that we're only talking about the safe issues and not what's really going on. Like, we all seem to have this little frame. It's okay to talk about this, but when I get outside of it, I'm going to be in trouble. I shouldn't talk about this because somebody's going to think about this, or I'm going to, and it's usually something about judgment. So to set a powerful container conducive to reflection, we have to expand that circle, that area that is allowable to, that basically feel people as safe, a safe zone in which we can have this conversation. And a way to do that is by being explicit that this is a judgment-free zone. And that's just not one saying it. It actually means sitting in that for a second and saying, yes, of course we're going to be judging each other. That's a human thing. Now, we're going to actively practice going from being judgmental to being compassionate of each other and being much more interested in what's true than in being right. And what also helps in setting up that container is by being purposeful. We're not here about being right. We're here about serving some purpose, or about being in truth and love, whatever the purpose is or the value orientation is, and then we can go for that place. So that would be the first thing. The second thing would be to make it concrete. So to give a specific question and saying, now that we've done this reflection, what do we commit to? And we like the frame of from twos that we talked about in an earlier podcast. Like, what is one or two or three behaviors or mindsets that we're going to leave behind? And what are one or two or three mindsets and behaviors we're going to practice as a result of that? And then we can keep reminding each other of those things. Always like as play. It's like, how are we doing on this from two? And so the next meeting, we're going to do another review and saying, hey, how do we do this on this from two? From, let's say, talking over each other to really listening might be a from two, or from always keeping it safe and always having agreement, to being together in the thorny issues with enjoyment, whatever the from two might be. So that's a little bit about how I would see that.
Yeah, when it comes to creation of and nurturing of team culture and connected teamwork, it's so important to be very people and process oriented, and they work so hand in hand. The people have to ultimately define and execute the process, but the people also have to come together and figure out, how do we adapt, tweak the process as we react and respond to what's happening with the team, with the market, with what leadership is telling us, et cetera. I always like to say, don't let the catastrophe be the only time you talk. You've got to make sure that you're working together as part of a team, to work on successes, work on the day-to-day, reflecting on what's working and what's not. And as Hilke said, it's got to be a safe environment. There has to be open communication. We talk a lot on this show about establishing that foundation of trust and transparency with your team. That is going to make it a conducive environment for productive reflection. Active listening. We as leaders have to make sure that we, foster and orchestrate these discussions, but we're not the focal point of it. As a leader, I want to hear, what my team has to say, what's working, what's not. In fact, I've often empowered and enabled them to have players-only meetings where they meet without me in the room, and then somebody is a spokesperson with constructive feedback for me. And then I can take that upon myself. If they've given me a list of 5-10 things, gives me an opportunity. I may not be able to do all of them, but I can certainly work to make progress on multiple of these things. And that's the power of what can happen from reflection. Furthermore, we talked about this earlier, learning from mistakes, going through, have that environment where you even celebrate mistakes. And as leaders, we can do that. I own a lot of those things. In fact, on a call I was on earlier today, I called out 3 things that I did that I felt were ineffective in the past fiscal year that I was going to do differently, that would now allow me to focus and be more disciplined better. So leading by example as leaders, if we do that, it will help our team's own reflection as they look at things that they can do to foster better focus and more discipline. So I think those are the key elements that we can really do to motivate, kickstart, and be the catalyst for the value of reflection by leading by example, and establishing a conducive environment for that reflection.
Thank you. Thank you, Carson. Thank you, Hilke. We're going to take a very short break and then we'll continue.
You are listening to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Do you want to learn more about building the next level of connectedness in your team? Please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
We already talked that it's important to reflect on successes. It's important to reflect on failures and have some time dedicated for that. If we look at specific team, let's say performance or behavior, right? Behavior of individuals, behavior of the team when we make decisions or resolve conflicts or something, what in your experience, what do you think are important elements or aspects that really require, like a hard stop and have a reflective 5 minutes or I don't know, 40 minutes or something meeting? What are some of those examples that come to mind?
Yeah, I would define that as a significant event. And that could be any number of things. There's often times where we will wrap a call. And the beauty of our hybrid work world that we live in now is that we can share notes with colleagues in real time while we're in meetings, or immediately after perhaps a customer call or a larger internal call ends, we can huddle and we can have a reflection on that significant event. This could be a change. This could be a conversation with a customer. It could be an escalation, could be a project, could be a particular milestone. Successes are important, but as we've talked about, even failures or just stoppages or blockers, these are all fodder for debriefing. Debriefing is a structured process where the team can talk about the outcomes, any pivots that are required, and experiences. Elena, you said something really important earlier, that there's a lot of different perspectives. We're all different. And that's why it's so important as a part of these reflections and these debriefs that we are actively listening, that we're hearing the vantage point. I can't tell you how many times I've had a debrief and someone heard something I didn't catch. I was maybe so laser focused on another component and already my mind was working around how I wanted to address that component, but someone else on my team caught something pivotal that we need to make sure that we get. And that's why the debrief is so important, that we're spending time hearing from everyone's different perspective. And when we do this, and when we show grace and we show that we're actively listening to our team, guess what? That continues to invest in the cohesion of the team and the knowledge sharing. It makes us more effective as problem solvers. It helps us drive accountability. And all of those things continues to invest in the caliber of the team. We trust each other more because we've gone through these things together. I have to tell you, when you're, I was reflecting on a lot of prior teams that I've worked with and even current teams that I work with, as you kind of go through some of these wins and even these crucibles together as a team, that's what really makes you have that foundation of trust with your team, because you know what you're going to get from each other and you want to continue to create that environment that's going to be conducive for great connected teamwork.
Thank you, Carson. I would just, an immediate thought that jumped to my mind is that also when you do this as consistently, right? When you have these reflections here and there, and the team kind of knows how they typically go and what's happening, some bigger themes will surface over the time, right? Some themes will come, again and again, and they become indicative of a bigger change or bigger transformation that's required. Hilke.
Makes total sense. I resonated with what both of you said and Carson about sometimes you hear something that somebody else said. So when is it a good time? I see it a little bit as exhale and inhale. So the inhale is like the work, doing the work. And then naturally needs to be an exhale. And when we look at our work, our meetings, where the team is in its journey, there's going to be natural times of a lot of inhale, working towards a goal, meeting a customer challenge, working through something, working through a challenge. And then, let's exhale for a second. And knowing that there's going to be an exhale also helps us to inhale more deeply, because we know, we're going to try this out and we're going to make some mistakes, and we'll have this safe place in which we're going to take a look together, not to judge each other, but to grow together. And it's something I look forward to. So when I'm in a meeting, difficult meeting or workshop with my colleagues, and we have this natural exhale at the end, which is where we debrief. How did the workshop go? How did this training go? It's something I look forward to. And even when I'm in the workshop, there's a little bit of me. It's like, oh, yeah. It's this place of, I enjoy the growth. It's in a reminder that I enjoy the process of growing, and I'm going to have some dedicated time, just like going to the gym or going to walk in nature or to read a book, to actually grow, to say and be focused on this very question of figuring out, how am I going to grow with you? So that would be a good time for me, when you intuitively know it's time for an exhale, which, looking at the human bodies, needs to be quite regular. Otherwise, we have lots of things that pent up, that build up.
Yeah, exactly. And then there is a much more massive problem if you don't do the exhale pretty regularly. I love that analogy of inhaling, exhaling, and I was also thinking that it would be nice if we could the last few minutes that we have, if we would spend them maybe talking about some specific tips or ideas for a leader, for a team leader who who is facilitating, let's say, the session and reflection. Like, something that I thought about, that when you inhale, when you do the work and there is a lot of activity, even though typically there is a lot of coordination, it also may be a time of aloneness. When you have your tasks and you do your task and someone else does their tasks, you communicate, you coordinate, but still there is a lot of things you have to do alone, right? And if some of those didn't go as perfectly as you wanted them to go, right, then we have that debrief. When we have the debrief, we may come there a little tense and a bit angry at someone and so on. And in my view, that's the time when the leader really should focus on the team's energy and that sense of togetherness. So it's not just to analyze the project or do the post-mortem of whatever happened, right? It's really to stimulate, we are in it together. And that whole unity is something I need to be watching out for in that whole discussion. Carson, any tips for the team leader?
Yeah, without a doubt. In fact, this kind of continues the thought that I shared earlier about an area that I saw in myself that I wanted to become more focused and disciplined around. And it's really just that intentionality, building the reflection into your rhythm. I looked at this past year, and there was a project, an idea that my team and I had come up with that was frankly brilliant at the beginning of the year, but it lost some steam throughout the year. And when we look back, we didn't have a developed cadence around it, even for a touch point. See, I think a lot of times as leaders, we never want to create a meeting just for meeting's sake. But even if it's a 5-minute touch point, a meeting with a purpose that ensures everyone's on the same page and allows that reflection and that sharing and that collaboration and those best practices being discussed, those are impactful investments in your team and in your connectedness as a team. So finding that intentional ability, right now we're kind of parlaying that project from a year ago into our new fiscal year, but we're also having the intentionality around a bi-weekly touch point. And if we have nothing to discuss, fine and good, we'll scrap it. But the goal of that is to come together, reflect on the past couple of weeks. How are we executing across this process? Are there changes? Are there tweaks we need to make? What's working? What's not? What have we learned? And those types of things, that consistency and that rhythm will help you build that comfortable muscle around reflection.
Thank you. And Hilke, any final thought?
For me, to put it simply, is the leader helps the team to sit back in their chair for a second, feel the back of your chair, and say with the team, and you can do this for yourself as a leader, like sit back for a moment And you can literally use those words. I'm going to have a moment, we're going to have a moment to sit back and to take a look. What went well? What can we do better? So we continue evolving. It's important for me to physically do this because when we're in the dance, in the activity, we tend to sort of be very focused forward. And just simply the act of sitting back, just try it out if you're listening, sitting back. It creates it activates something else in our nervous system, which we can then communicate to the rest of the people. Just so sit back and let's take a look.
Great. With that thought, we'll end this episode of Connected Teamwork podcast dedicated to team reflection. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Take a moment to reflect on what you learned today that can help build your team. Also, if you like, think about one of your team members and what you appreciate about them. Let them know. Enjoy connecting more deeply to what is great about them. And see you next time at the Connected Teamwork podcast.